lower the sanctions for maybe business commerce to be able to promote our well-being here in Merced, because we don't want to be stuck with our tax dollars being wasted. There were actually a few issues that I heard, so I'm just gonna, limit them to a few, and maybe I would love to get some input afterwards on how you guys really feel about this. So in the Central Valley, we have a lack of doctors. We have, we don't have that many doctors, and so one of the bills that's being pushed to the state legislature, SB A41, which is trying to fund a medical school, a medical facility here in Merced, at least. Right? This would create an opportunity for the Central Valley that would, promote its well-being, promote its health, public health, and public safety. It would, maybe take these people off the streets and put them in an institution where they can recover and they can actually go into being a normal citizen again and a functional citizen. So we would like to see where are the subsidies and the budgeting going to go to actually support these research facilities and the expansion. And so UC Merced is it's a fairly new campus. There's a feeling that goes both ways on it. And we as students want to make sure that we're outreaching to the community and we make sure that we're all feeling welcome. We do a lot of outreach to our government officials, and I'm hesitant to say that on a lot of occasions it's not reciprocated in the same fashion. So not enough outreach to our student body, reaching out to us. We would like to throw a town hall. We would like to throw an informational event at your campus. Would you be interested in that? Things like that would be wonderful. Being a student leader, being municipal relations and legislative affairs, we would love to have that on our campus, and we would love to have that without having to reach out every so often and say, can you come to our campus? Although, respectively, I would like to say that on most occasions, when we've reached out, they've come and they've been there and they've given great information. So that is one of the biggest things. We would also like to know where funding for the high-speed rail, and I'm not sure if everyone knows about this, but the high-speed rail is supposed to be passing through Merced. And so we would like to know where the funding, where the infrastructure and where the means for this is actually going to come from. Likewise, we'd like to, I've actually navigated myself through the budgeting system on the county website, and the numbers, they all add up, but they're really ambiguous and they're really hard to trace down to the root. And so definitely will be at those meetings to kind of try to help and try to find out what we can do. And I would encourage any citizen, any civilian here in Merced to attend these meetings and advocate on behalf of your right to that public record and right to having what is financially due to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So now we have heard a few words from each one of our panelists. Yusuf, thank you for sitting with this esteemed panel and for presenting your concern from UC as a student. And we welcome the student population being involved in the city and the county of Merced. I think everybody on the panel would agree this evening that the more that the students from UC Merced get involved, the better opportunity for all of us, the students as well as the municipalities and the county. So with that, I would like to open up to our audience questions that people might want to ask. I would also invite our panelists to have a discussion with each other or points. I saw most everybody, including myself at some point, making a note about something. So if there are questions from our audience, Miranda.
I've got a question.
Okay.
And the question's for Joe. But it touches on something that Dr. Kolnick and Yusuf both said. So Dr. Kolnick was talking about the trust, how there's a distrust in government, and Yusuf was kind of talking about how UC students were scared here in Merced. So my question for Joe, because he was talking about how, he's taking, the newspaper will take people to court to try and get this information from the government. What are your comments on the ratio of good news to bad news in the newspaper? And I mean, perhaps the UC students might be afraid because the newspaper's putting in a lot more effort towards reporting the crime than they are reporting the good stuff, and that might be a reason for the distrust of government as well.
I get that question frequently. And the one thing that's happened recently, and in the last 10 years, is the internet has allowed us to really kind of figure out exactly what people are reading. And I got to tell you, in terms of crime news, Modesto and Merced, we really don't put a huge emphasis on it. But I'll tell you what, that's what people want to read. And Mike, who worked in the paper, both you guys, both Mikes here, they know what gets attention from our readership. And unfortunately, they want to read about crime news.
Okay, Joe, let me interrupt you for just a second for the audience, because I think that what you said is probably true, and that's probably somewhat common knowledge. However, could you share with us maybe why? Why do you think that people want to read the negative news and not more what Miranda was talking about in terms of the more positive news? Do you have
I think it's human
any
nature.
ideas? You've been in this business, you guys have all been in this business for a long time.
I think it's human nature. I think people
Okay.
have an interest when they hear a fire siren, or if they see something going on down on the street, they want to know what happened. And I think at a very basic level, that's news that people want to know about. We will put together a big story that's really important, that I think, over the weekend, we did a story about irrigation districts and how they're pumping a bunch of water and also selling it. And I thought it was a very, very well done story, and it covered a lot of ground. And it didn't even rate in the top 5 on our website that day. It did in Modesto, but not in Merced. And it's a big deal, and it's something that was illuminating, and it just didn't, people don't have that same level of interest. Now, I think the big players in that were following it. And so it does have incredible impact. But in terms of the wider audience, I think sometimes people just don't have that interest. And they have so many sources of news, and they have so many different options, and they're going to follow what interests them. And locally, it's crime news. And I see that fly right up to the top of all of our web traffic and our sites. And so we try not to emphasize that in print. And the other thing, too, is, and I think people sometimes mistake this, is we're not around to be a cheerleader for the community or to be a Chamber of Commerce publication. We are here to tell the news as it happens so that people then could draw their own conclusions and could figure out what they're going to do about it. And so we're here to try to tell the truth of what's happening. A lot of times it's not always positive. And so there's a lot of stuff that happens that a lot of people would say is negative. And but that doesn't mean we can't cover that. I think people have a right to know about that. And we do write a lot of stories about great things that happen in the community. Unfortunately, they just don't get the same level of attention from our readers. So, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I'd like to go back to the topic about the students and the relationship to the community here. I do media work. I'm a social justice media producer for Community Access TV. We don't have one, but I do it in Santa Cruz and Mendocino and lots of other places play my shows. And I was on a media pass at the UCM Black History Music Art Movement weekend. And I interviewed a lot of students and they mostly were of color. And I had an absolute consensus of people telling me, the students telling me, these are out-of-towners living in the dorm. As soon as they get here, they're informed that they have to be careful coming downtown, not because of the street people, because of law enforcement, because there's so much profiling and targeting going on here.
In Merced.
And yes, see, that's what's interesting. You've had 2 police brutality lawsuits in the last year, and your paper hardly says anything about them. One involved throwing down of a mental health worker by 3 cops. And I interviewed people that work for the mental health department. They don't even know what happened to their colleague. So I'm really not in agreement with what you're saying about, like, you didn't sue the county to take out the Commander Buttery story. We still don't know about the sex scandal at the Sheriff's Department. That got whisked under the carpet. There's all kinds of things going on that we don't know. And I'm really concerned. I don't think you have free access to your paper. I submitted a letter to the editor 3 times regarding a judge in town that all the vets now know the story, are worked to the bone about, and you guys won't print it. And it's big, like at the vets job fair, it was just big news, especially with people from the state level. So, also like what, I forget your name that works for the, last time you told me you worked for Parks and Rec, but I always thought you worked for Bramble. I had the same experience like last year at the budget hearings for the city. There's a big tax loss I want tracked, like who's going to pay the tax dollars back that the building inspector, the official, David Gonzalez, and some people wasted. That's all documented. How much did it total? Who's going to pay it back? And the mayor almost leaped over the thing and tried to get the police to take me out. Captain West and I were laughing about it outside afterwards. What, are you going to arrest me? And he's like, oh, please don't push the envelope. But I mean, see, but he did what he didn't say. He said it was totally inappropriate. What I would have appreciated him saying was, it's not the right time to discuss this. This is when you bring up wasted tax dollars and how you do it and where. Because I don't think that the city is at all involved with the people. They may sure they let us speak, and why wouldn't they? It's the Brown Act, we're entitled. But okay, good, they do it. But I never had any feedback from any of them on several major issues. And most people I know that show up here have the same experience. I know a man who's already moving from here that moved from San Jose. Someone we would want in this town, in my opinion, like a really good citizen. And he's like, I can't take it because nobody ever deals with anything. So I just want you to know, I have a whole different experience. And I talked to a lady out at UCM yesterday, Molly Bechtel. She wants me to work with the student group. They're interested in social justice. And when I told her, like, for example, they don't even know about what happens at the jail if you're a Mexican here in town and you get arrested, say, at a party, which could happen. You have to pick which gang you're in. There's 2 blocks for Mexicans. Once you pick it, you're in that gang forever on the register and you lose your scholarship. She's like, what are you telling me? That's totally illegal. Well, who doesn't know it? But it goes on. It's still going on. It's right over there. It's like, you know. So I'm really happy for the UCM. To me, it's my most important link here in having moved here. And I'm one of the early B Greeners and get all the Class K and solar. So they like me and I like them. And I have a real problem with my government officials, county level. I have real problems with the Sun Star. I couldn't believe when I heard it was a McClatchy newspaper. I was from Fresno. The Fresno Bee is like a rocking paper. You get the news. Here, no follow-up.
Thank you.
I'd love to respond just
Okay.
to the portion of what you're saying. So in regards to you said the Black Arts Conference you went to, and you asked a few people, and this consensus was that.
Well, I didn't think to ask it, to tell you the truth. It wasn't till Molly had some student volunteers there that met me and knew what I was doing there, that they asked me, and also because I've been in the movement is why I was there, you know, and I have a lot of grassroots experience of success. And so they asked me would I help them, because students were having this issue. And then I thought, wow, that is so weird. So I did ask students, and they all said, oh God, are you kidding? Like these black girls were like, oh, we don't come to town. We won't go, we're afraid. And you know what? They have reason to be, in my opinion, when you look at the record of our PD. Not everybody, I know we got some good ones, but we got some real dogs, in my opinion.
A lot of the stigma arises when you have older upperclassmen or older UC students that maybe experience a stigma or experience this type of kind of uncomfortable feeling and pass that down to the dorm students. Unfortunately, our dorm students aren't, fully participant in Merced.
Sir, I don't think that is the issue. Because I'm from Santa Cruz. When UC Santa Cruz came, Now, I was my family's part of the good old boys there. My uncle was DA and all like that, but I was part of the movement. Nobody talked to me, but that's okay. But I worked with the students, and we organized a cop watch, because Santa Cruz used to be very bad. And the whole police department has changed. We formed a citizens group. They did cop watch trainings at the university. Civil right, know your rights trainings, not just for this kind of a, but for if you're stopped. I think it's absolutely necessary. If it's being passed down, I think it's because it's based on things people have experienced here. And to just write it off, I don't think is doing the city a favor, certainly not the merchants, and not the students. Because it's kind of barren out there. Of course they want to come in sometimes. But are you going to risk coming in and maybe being profiled?
But I think a big thing that we would like to do is maybe see where does the funding actually go to like facilitate these programs or facilitate, actually reducing this issue that you may be talking about. And if there is funding, or if there is kind of some responsibility of government to alleviate these issues.
Kind of what?
If there is actually that responsibility within the government to alleviate these issues. That's somewhere we would like to look, maybe see if there's any programs enacted for what you're saying. And that's why we're here, to actually make these public records open and to ask our representatives, maybe if these are available.
Dr. Coleman, did you have a response?
Well, not to the point in particular, but I think this discussion points to a lot of the tensions and difficulties with moving beyond the sort of procedural openness and the responding to the Brown Act and things like that, and some of the things that you're trying, like the open town hall meetings and the community meetings and this event here. It's work, and discussing priorities is work, and both sides. The government oftentimes feels under siege. Hold a town hall meeting, people don't show up, or very few people show up, and at the same time, the community feels that we're not addressing their needs. And that's why I'm suggesting that with the openness, government needs to be very thoughtful in, the community needs to be very engaged, to have these conversations and to begin to see eye to eye about perhaps what the police are doing and what the city's reaction to it is, and all of these things, and fairly focused, because an open-ended meeting very often turns into just a complaining session.
Yeah.
And that's also not all that productive, although perhaps if it's some set priorities, you need to do that first to figure out what is on people's minds. But it's not an easy process, and it's certainly not a quick process either.
Quick is, I think, is one of the key words that, it is a time-consuming process. And, like many of you have alluded to, I think that there's a lot of time that people have to put into these open meetings, and there has to be a lot of ongoing discussion. Are there other questions from our audience? Yes.
As a League of Women voter member, and one that's been before the county, probably more than the city lately, but has to do with the budget process and the ability of the public to really become engaged. The city, as Mike alluded to, has, starting in February, a series of budget priorities setting, open sessions. Some are on Saturday, some are on Friday night, but, they're there. The county does adhere to their regulations. They don't need to do a budget before their date in June, and they don't need to pass their final budget until August. And as a member of the league and as a part of our local position, we make many presentations about the fact that when we get the budget in June, the dense document, that doesn't really tell us all the conversations that occurred in advance to set those priorities. That doesn't seem to be easily apparent in prior meetings. And I realize you're not Jim Brown, and you're not anyone.
But I'll do what I can.
The supervisor. And we have had sessions with them as well, that for us to really engage in saying, well, we'd rather this priority or this emphasis, that does not seem transparent. They make a reflection about, given our priorities, we don't find them on the website, we don't hear them in a, maybe there's a priority at a meeting, but not a discussion about the priorities. And so to really understand the budget means you understand where priorities were set and you had a role in being engaged, being able to be engaged. And would say that the process that sets that preliminary budget in June, while there's a lot of time before August, rarely is there much of a change unless the state government changes the way funding is distributed. So just thoughts?
Yeah, I appreciate the comments there.
There's a way to know when all that priority.
Yeah, and of course, our number one priority is always public safety. That's the biggest component of our local funds do go to public safety. As far as the process in terms of the budget, we do operate in a little bit of a different way than the city does. But I think the best time, again, is to come forward during proposed budget or at final budget and share your comments then. We have these meetings. Sometimes we have more department heads than we have members of the public. But you have seen during proposed budget and final budget people coming and providing their comments, and you have seen change come from that. I can think of about 2 or 3 years back, there were some proposed changes going on with the library, and you saw people came out in force, provided their comments about that, and that definitely influences how decisions are made. And the Board of Supervisors they do take into account all those comments, and they take them very seriously. So to me, that's the best time, is to come during proposed, come during final, and share your comments. And I understand that may not be enough time to come at proposed, you may not have been through the whole document, but come at that meeting, come to that meeting and watch the presentation. There's a very good presentation that's put on by the CEO and the assistant CEO regarding the budget. That's a good time for questions. I'm always around, and I'm trying to be a better conduit in terms of getting this information out to the public and explaining it. But in the meantime, I would encourage folks to come to proposed and come to final and provide some comment then. And personally, for me, proposed is really important. That way we know what the community is thinking moving forward. We have town hall meetings in various communities. We don't get a lot of attention there, but that's another good time to come forward and present some of what you're thinking in terms of budget, ask questions. We have department heads from across the county up there, and that's what I would encourage, is some more engagement in the processes that we do have in place at this point.
One follow-up.
Sure.
Is there a time in the process at a regular board meeting of the Board of Supervisors where there is a discussion about the board's priority as the Board of Supervisors' priorities as they approach that proposed budget date for June, where as a member of the public, we would have that information in front of us?
Yeah, in terms of like a priority list, basically, and
We get updates on
Sure.
how the money's coming in and where we are compared to last year, and it looks like we won't have to make cuts. And that's far
Sure.
better than what we used to get.
yeah.
But what we're looking for is a discussion before the public that says, we know public safety is number one, but there's
Yeah.
other money,
Mhm.
and we know where the library is. So it's just, where would we go? I mean, I've attended those meetings, and I've yet to know that real discussion occurs.
Yes. You see some of that happening at these meetings, but you're talking about a discussion across the board, all departments. That would be a big discussion. That would be,
Right, and it's over
yeah.
a period of time.
Sure,
I'm not looking
sure.
for it all one meeting, but it's just, so on the website, would I see priorities somewhere?
That's actually something that it's interesting you bring that up. We are working on doing a better job of outlining our priorities and what we're doing moving forward. So you might see some more of that soon in terms of priorities. And yeah, it's something I've actually worked on in recent weeks. So we would like to, you're definitely right there, do more of getting that out there, letting people know exactly what's going on behind the scenes in terms of this budget process.
Well, it helps inform one and anticipate what the budget could begin to look like as you craft that.
Sure.
Really knows those priorities.
Sure, thank you for the comments, I appreciate it.
I just wanted to say, I think your observations really point to some of the problems with the procedural openness that counties clearly following the law, and doing what most government entities, public entities do in this situation. But it sets up almost an inherent conflict. The people who are concerned, well, they see the proposed budgets, it's up to them to then voice their concerns, and we're now in an adversarial situation, we're pitting interests against one another, when perhaps a more difficult conversation up front, but then one that saves, that results in more fulfilling engagement, would be to engage people very early on and try to figure out what those priorities are, and then when the proposed budget comes out, to have them reflect those priorities.
Yeah, that's something we're trying to have more of a focus on. We do have a mid-year budget review, actually, a presentation by the CEO and the assistant CEO, kind of letting people know where we're at this year, how funds are looking. You might see that presentation coming very soon for the Board of Supervisors, actually, just detailing again where we're at budgetarily, expectations moving forward into proposed budget, and that's something we've done in the past, but we're taking a little more of an effort to do that regularly and present as much information as possible prior to proposed budget.
So Mike, if people wanted to find out when that meeting actually was going to happen, when that was be on the agenda for the next, whatever the next supervisorial meeting is, could they call you? Is that an appropriate way to find out?
You're more than welcome
Is it
to.
going to be posted
Yeah.
on the website? How would anybody in this audience, for example, or the students who are watching us from UC Merced,
Sure.
how would they find out when that is going to be presented?
Well, our meetings are on Tuesdays.
Mhm.
Regular open session starts at 10 a.m. and the agendas are posted the Friday before the meeting. So I would definitely check the website that Friday before each board meeting, and that's going to have everything lined out in terms of any presentations, what's going to be on the agenda. That's where you get all that information. So oftentimes I can't say too much prior to the release of the agenda because I may not know what's going on. Oftentimes I don't see what's on the agenda till it's released to the public. But definitely on Friday prior to the meeting, take a look at the website, and that's going to show you everything that's going to happen at that meeting and what's on the agenda for that day.
Okay, Mr. Yakubi and then Mr. Keo.
I'd like to know, as a city entertained, maybe adopting a more diverse fiscal tracking system?
The city or the county?
County.
Yeah, we've looked into some of that because I understand that when you're looking through the budget, there's a lot of numbers. It's very number heavy. It's hard to understand. We have played around with some ideas in terms of what we can do to make these numbers more accessible to the public and more digestible and easy to understand. You see a lot of it during the budget presentation. We would like to possibly, I don't want to get ahead of anybody here, but maybe take more of an effort to have some of that on the website on maybe a continual basis.
I have a quick question for
Sure.
you. How many, does this county still hold meetings at night?
The Board of Supervisors?
Yeah.
No, 10 a.m.
So is
That's-
there ever a night meeting? Or?
No, just town hall meetings occur at night. We have some of those, but no regular meetings during.
That was a crusade that the Sun Star took on a number of years ago when I was editor. And we did get them to eventually meet, I think, once every quarter at night. So obviously they don't do that anymore. I think it's really hard for people to come in the mornings. And it doesn't really invite public participation. And I think if the community wants to have more access to what's going on in the county, maybe the county needs to start holding some of the meetings at night again when more people can go.
Yeah.
Has that been discussed recently?
Not that I'm aware of, but I would encourage you, if you have those type of comments, bring them to the Board of Supervisors and make them there.
You used the word that I had just put, part of this is to invite, to do a lot of outreach, and it's tough, but it's not just once. Even simple things. We were doing a survey of some people in the community in Turlock, asking how much they used the university as a place for recreation. And there was a whole segment of the population that, because they had never been exposed to higher education, didn't realize that was a public university that was there for them to walk. And they said, well, of course we've never been there. We've never been invited.
Good point.
And
Good point.
the same sorts of things with the town hall meetings and things like that. Announcements are one thing. Inviting, outreach, targeting is another.
Okay, we've got 3 questions back here in the back. I'll go to the very back one first.
Okay. My name is Lisa Marroquin, and my question is for Mr. Conway. You mentioned earlier about, really inviting the public to attend these meetings, and I personally really appreciate that because I think it's important for people to be engaged with their local government. And so, for instance, my question is for the February 12th town hall, there was a very high turnout. I think it was about 100 people came out. And from sitting there, I think the conversation was primarily directed towards more youth investment. And so my question with that is, having heard from a large volume of people at this public meeting that the community really wanted to see that from the city, where does that stand now in terms of creating the city budget?
It's going to be discussed at the policy session. That was one of the things that was taken back and is being essentially digested, and we are working on that as far as how we would implement that. The problem, as I mentioned, is our budget isn't increasing that much, so it's a matter of figuring out how do we implement that and where do we go. One of the directions that council has given us in the past is to try to find community partners that we can work with. So that is one area where we are trying to work and see who we can partner with that might be able to help do that. So that's one of the things that we're trying to do. And yes, we did have a good turnout at the Tenaya School Town Hall meeting. And I was not meaning to reflect that that was a particularly bad turnout. It was much stronger than the one we had at Rivera. And in the town hall meetings, we generally have a pretty good turnout. In fact, we generally have a better turnout at our town hall meetings than we do at our regular city council meetings. So that's sort of an interesting reflection. And there's usually more items on our city council agendas reflecting a wider interest than on our town hall agendas. So it's sort of an interesting, I'm not sure conundrum-wise why that turnout is.
I'd like to go to the gentleman on the aisle that, you have your hand up a minute ago, yes.
Okay, yeah, we deal with a lot with the police brutality issues, and so recently we were having to, request public information, things of that nature, and we're curious, like, say if there's an incident that happens and emails are communicated back and forth and whatnot. And we're wondering if text messages are included in that. Say after an incident, if I'll talk hypothetically, say a police officer discharges his gun and he gets on his phone, is there a way to find out? Or are text messages included in that?
Included in what you can.
In a public information,
request.
see if we would make a request, could we request text messages?
I've actually heard that go back and forth a little bit as far as I'm aware now, and I'll defer to, maybe Mike and Joe here on this one, but I don't think those are accessible, and it depends a lot on if it's a public versus a private phone. What do you think, Mike?
It's
It's something worth asking for and getting lawyers involved.
That's one way to get an answer, yes.
I'll tell you what, we've asked for dash cam videos and stuff and gotten it, so.
And it depends on the nature of what you're asking for and what is going on in the situation. I know we have released, we've released dash cam videos and other things. So it's going to be a case by case, I would hate to say yes or no on that.
Okay.
And incidents involving police are different than incidents involving other city employees. So that's going, and especially because it's involving crime and issues of law, but again.
It's an ongoing investigation.
Yeah.
That, clear that one up.
But even in ongoing investigations, they have, there are times where they will release it if they're looking for a suspect and things like that too, so.
Yeah,
I know that they've had to release personal emails from personal email addresses before.
Yeah,
So.
I'm just curious about the whole phone thing. Everybody's so.
That's a good question.
Sure.
But, well, let me introduce myself first, sorry about that. My name is Jesse Ornelas. I've lived in Merced for a couple of decades already. I'm a founding, born in this county. My grandmother was born in 1902, in Planada, and so my family's invested a lot, in this county. So I care about living in Merced, living in South Merced, and I remember when the UC came, everybody was excited, and people still excited about having a UC in Merced. So much that local government bends over backwards for UC students. They cater to them. They worry about their safety so much that it scares UC students, it seems to me. That the UC Merced students have this opinion of people that live in certain areas in Merced. And I just want to let them know that not everybody that lives in those neighborhoods are bad.
That's true.
It's just like there's bad people in every neighborhood. A lot of UC Merced students come from LA, and LA is not the safest place either. And then I know what it's like to be on student government. I was the ASMC president last school year at Merced College. And being involved in student government is great. You get to work with people. You're a voice for the students. But